Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. It's not easy to talk about this, but I feel like I need to. I need to get it out. The story starts, as so many do these days, with a text message. A short, cold notification that lit up my phone screen and instantly dropped a block of ice into my stomach. It was a Thursday afternoon, the autumn light slanting through my office window, painting everything in a warm, golden hue that felt like a complete lie. The message was from my father. Family meeting tonight, 8 p.m., everyone must come. This is urgent. I stared at the glowing words, my thumb hovering over the screen. Urgent. That was a word my father hadn't used in connection with me for a very, very long time. 14 months, to be exact. 14 months of a silence so profound, so complete, that I had started to believe I was an orphan, a ghost in my own family's history. A bitter smile touched my lips. I knew what this was about. Of course I did. But before we get to that, I need to take you back. I need you to understand the silence that came before the storm. 14 months ago, I got married. I married the love of my life, Liam, in the backyard of the house we had painstakingly restored together. It wasn't just a backyard. It was acres of rolling green hills, sloping down to a serene, private lake. We stood under a century-old oak tree, its branches draped with thousands of tiny golden fairy lights. We exchanged our vows surrounded by an ocean of white roses, their scent heavy and sweet in the late afternoon air. We had 50 guests, 50 people who had rearranged their lives, bought plane tickets, and driven for hours to be there. Our friends, our chosen family. My blood family, however, was conspicuously absent. The memory still has the power to steal my breath. I remember sending the invitations, thick cream cardstock with gold leaf lettering. I remember calling each of them, my voice bright with an optimism that now feels painfully naive. My sister Sarah had texted back almost immediately, her words dripping with casual disdain. Sorry, can't make it. Backyard weddings aren't really our thing. A bit trashy, don't you think? I remember staring at that word, trashy, feeling it brand itself onto my skin. My older brother Kevin, the golden child, had been even more blunt. He didn't even bother with a text. He left a voicemail, his voice impatient, as if my wedding was just an annoying inconvenience in his very important life. Holly, listen, it's a 6-hour drive for me. I'm not wasting a whole weekend for such a basic ceremony. Let me know when you have a real party. And my mother, Eleanor, she sent a short, sweetly cruel email that was somehow worse than all the rest. Dearest Holly, it began, while Liam is a lovely boy, a casual outdoor wedding just doesn't reflect our family's standards. We have a reputation to uphold. I hope you understand. Understand? How could I understand? Was their reputation more important than their daughter's happiness? Was their standard of a real wedding a rented ballroom and a bland chicken dinner? I had poured my heart and soul into creating a day that was intimate, personal, and beautiful, a day that reflected who Liam and I were, not what my family wanted to project to the world. My father, Richard, he didn't respond at all. Not a text, not an email, not a call, just nothing. The empty space where his response should have been was the loudest rejection of all. So, on that perfect September day, I walked down an aisle of scattered rose petals on the arm of Liam's father. I looked out at the faces of our friends, their eyes shining with genuine happiness for us. But over their shoulders I saw it, the table, the one table I had insisted on setting, against Liam's gentle protests. It was set for 8, with a beautiful centerpiece and place cards bearing their names, Dad, Mom, Kevin, Sarah, and their spouses. an empty monument to my foolish hope that they might surprise me, that they might show up at the last minute. That empty table haunted me. It was a physical manifestation of the hole they had left in my heart. Later that night, long after the last guest had departed, Liam held me in our moonlit garden as I finally let the tears fall. I cried for the family I wished I had, not the one I was born into. For 14 months, that silence held. No calls on my birthday, no text on Christmas, nothing. I was a branch they had simply pruned from the family tree. Until this morning. This morning, everything changed. Because this morning, the Lifestyle Channel aired the premiere of their new series, American Dream Estates. And the home that opened the show, the one they spent 20 minutes fawning over, calling it a masterpiece of historical restoration, it was mine. They showed every restored room, every hand-carved doorframe, every shining inch of my 12-acre lakefront estate. They revealed its current market value of $6.2 million. They interviewed me about how I'd purchased it as a distressed property for a fraction of that cost 3 years earlier, pouring my life savings and every ounce of my energy into bringing it back from the brink of ruin. And yes, they even played footage from my wedding, my basic, trashy backyard wedding, now broadcast to millions as the epitome of rustic elegance. The segment went viral. By noon, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Old friends, distant cousins, even ex-classmates I hadn't spoken to in a decade were suddenly so proud of me. And then, at 4:43 p.m., the text from my father arrived. Family meeting tonight, 8 p.m. Everyone must come. This is urgent. I looked at the text, then out the window at the gardens where I had cried on my wedding night. The golden light was fading, and the sky was turning a bruised purple. A cold, hard certainty settled in my chest. I knew exactly what this urgent meeting was about, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to meet them with hope or tears. I was going to meet them with the truth. I texted back a simple reply, "I'll be there." Liam found me still sitting in my office, the screen of my phone dark on the desk beside me. The last rays of sunlight had vanished, leaving the room in a soft twilight. He didn't have to ask what was wrong. He knew me too well. He just came up behind me and rested his hands on my shoulders, his touch a familiar, grounding comfort. "It was your father, wasn't it?" he asked softly. I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. I just pointed to the phone. He picked it up, his brow furrowing as he read the short, demanding message. He let out a slow breath. "Urgent," he said, the word dripping with the same sarcasm I felt. "After 14 months of silence, now it's urgent." "The show aired this morning," I said, my voice flat. "That's the only urgency that exists in their world." Liam had been my rock through all of this. He was an architect, and we'd met when I first bought this property. He saw the vision I had for it when everyone else, including my own family, saw only a crumbling wreck. When I'd excitedly told my father I was starting my own historic property development company, he had patted me on the head, literally, and said, "That's nice, sweetie. It's good to have a little hobby." He'd called me a playing entrepreneur. My brother Kevin had laughed and said I'd be bankrupt in a year. Liam, on the other hand, had walked the dusty, cobweb-filled halls with me and seen the potential. He'd seen my potential. We fell in love over blueprints and salvaged hardwood floors. He was the one who held me when I'd call my mother, bubbling with excitement about a new discovery, an original stained glass window hidden behind a wall, a fireplace concealed for decades, only to be met with polite, bored disinterest. "Oh, that's interesting, dear. Now, did I tell you your brother Kevin is getting a promotion?" We rewatched the TV segment together on my laptop. There it was, our home, our life, packaged for public consumption. The drone shots sweeping over the lake, the camera lingering on the custom cabinetry in the kitchen, the host gushing about the seamless blend of historic charm and modern luxury. And then, there I was, walking through the gardens, talking about my company, North Star Property Development. They showed a graphic on the screen, Holly Miller, founder and CEO. The host's voiceover was glowing. Miller didn't just restore a house, she built an empire. Her company, now valued in the tens of millions, specializes in saving historic landmarks, transforming forgotten relics into breathtaking homes. Then came the wedding footage. The golden lights, the white roses, me in my Vera Wang gown, Liam's hand in mine. It looked like a fairy tale. The host called it an exquisitely personal and elegant affair, proving that true luxury isn't about extravagance, but authenticity. Authenticity. The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. Liam paused the video. "They saw this," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "They didn't see a daughter getting married. They saw a graphic on a screen. They saw a number. They saw an ATM." He was right. And in that moment, watching myself on that screen, a profound shift happened inside me. It was like a switch being flipped. The part of me that had spent a lifetime craving their approval, the part that still ached with the pain of their rejection, just went quiet. It was replaced by something cold, clear, and unyielding. The hurt was still there, a deep, foundational crack in my soul, but it was no longer an open wound. It was scar tissue, tough and protective. They had made their choices. They had defined our relationship by a set of standards I could never meet, or so they thought. Now, the standards had changed because they saw dollar signs, and they thought they could just summon me and I would come running, grateful for the crumbs of their attention. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Thank you for being here and listening to my story. Please let me know what city you're watching from in the comments below. Your presence here means more to me than you know. "I'm done, Liam," I said, turning in my chair to face him. My voice was eerily calm, a still lake after a storm. "I'm done trying. I'm done hoping. I'm done being their fallback plan, their emergency fund, their forgotten daughter until they need something. I'm just done." Liam knelt in front of me, taking my hands in his. His eyes, the color of warm whiskey, searched mine. He wasn't looking for cracks or tears. He was looking for resolve, and he found it. "Okay," he said simply. "So what do we do?" The "we" was everything. It always was with him. It wasn't my fight, it was ours. "We go," I said, a plan already forming in the cold, clear space in my mind. "But we don't go to a family meeting. There is no family. This is a business negotiation, and you never, ever go into a negotiation unprepared." A slow smile spread across Liam's face. He recognized this Holly. This was the woman who could walk onto a dilapidated construction site and command a room full of contractors. The woman who could stare down a stubborn city council over zoning permits. The woman who had built a company from nothing but grit and vision. The hurt, vulnerable daughter had left the building. The CEO had taken her place. "So this isn't a reunion," he said, his voice catching the spark in mine. "This is an audit." "Exactly," I replied, "and they are about to fail, spectacularly." The rest of the evening was a blur of preparation. We didn't talk about feelings anymore. We talked strategy. Liam made coffee while I went to the safe in our study. Out came the files. Not just business files, but personal ones. The ones I had kept for years, almost subconsciously, like a squirrel hoarding nuts for a winter it hopes will never come. Every birthday card from my parents that had a $20 bill tucked inside, but not a single personal handwritten word. Every dismissive email, every text message. I had them all. I was meticulous. It was part of my nature, the very trait that made me a successful developer. I never threw away a receipt, a contract, or a blueprint. And, as it turned out, I never threw away proof of their indifference. I remembered something my maternal grandmother, Rose, had told me years ago. She was the only one in my family who had ever truly seen me. She was a quiet, fiercely intelligent woman who had run her own small bookstore for 40 years. She didn't have much money, but she had a wealth of wisdom. A few weeks before she passed away, she had pressed a small, worn envelope into my hand. Inside was a check for $20,000, her entire life savings. "This is your seed money, Holly girl," she'd whispered, her hand frail on mine. "Don't let them tell you what you can or can't do. Don't let their small world make you small. You build whatever you dream of, and you remember that your worth isn't determined by their approval." Her words had been my mantra. That $20,000 was the down payment on the first small, run-down cottage I ever flipped. It was the foundation of everything I had built. My family had sneered at the paltry inheritance, especially Kevin, who had expected a much larger payout. My father had called it play money. But Grandma Rose had given me more than money. She had given me permission to succeed on my own terms, and she had given me a warning. I knew, even then, that a day of reckoning would come. So, as Liam and I sat at our large mahogany desk, the very picture of the success they now coveted, we assembled our arsenal. He printed out the latest valuation reports for our properties, the quarterly earnings statement for North Star, and the media features that had been written about my work. I, on the other hand, gathered the ghosts of the past. I found the catering bill for our wedding, $180,000, the invoice for the string quartet from Carnegie Hall, the receipt for my Vera Wang gown. I placed them next to the text message from Sarah calling my wedding trashy. The contrast was so stark, so damning, it was almost beautiful. "Are you sure you want to do this, Hall?" Liam asked, his voice gentle as he watched me place a copy of my grandmother's final letter into the pile. "This is going to be brutal." I looked up at him, my expression hard as steel. "They made it brutal, Liam, not me. They set the rules for this relationship a long time ago. Money, status, appearances, that's the only language they speak. Fine. Tonight, I'm going to speak their language, fluently." We weren't going there to plead our case or to ask for an apology. Apologies were worthless now. We were going there to close a deal, to liquidate a toxic asset, and that asset was my relationship with my family. The next morning was a strange combination of calm and electricity. A thick fog had rolled in from the lake, blanketing our property in a silent, gray embrace. It felt appropriate, like the world was holding its breath. Liam and I worked in comfortable silence. He was at his drafting table, sketching out designs for a new hotel renovation project we'd just landed, a $12 million deal. I was on the phone with lawyers and accountants, not out of necessity for the meeting, but as a way of reminding myself of the world I had built, a world of competence, respect, and mutual trust, a world so far removed from the petty jealousies and transactional love of my family that it felt like it was on another planet. Around noon, I received an email that made me pause. It was from Jessica, my brother Kevin's fiancée. I'd always had a soft spot for Jessica. She was sharp, ambitious, and worked as a paralegal at a corporate law firm. Frankly, she was far too good for my lazy, entitled brother. We weren't close, but we had a cordial relationship, built on the few times we'd seen each other at holidays before the Great Silence. Her email was short and cryptic. "Holly, I saw the show. Congratulations. It's all breathtaking. I have a feeling I know what tonight's urgent meeting is about. Be careful. They're desperate. More than you know." More than you know. The words sent a shiver down my spine. What didn't I know? I typed back a simple, "Thank you, Jessica. I appreciate the warning." I didn't press for more. Whatever it was, I would find out soon enough. Her message, however, served as another piece of evidence, another confirmation that my strategy was the right one. This was not a family reaching out in love. It was a pack of wolves, smelling blood, or in this case, money. As evening approached, I began to get ready. I chose my outfit with the precision of a general preparing for battle. Not a dress, a suit, a tailored, dark gray pantsuit that screamed power and control. Underneath, a simple silk blouse. On my feet, heels that were high enough to make a statement, but solid enough that I could stand my ground for hours if needed. Liam watched me as I stood in front of the mirror adjusting my blazer. "You look like you're about to hostily take over a Fortune 500 company," he said with a wry grin. "Close enough," I replied, my reflection looking back at me with an expression I barely recognized. It was calm, composed, and utterly devoid of fear. Finally, it was time to assemble the briefcase. We laid the documents out on our large kitchen island. It was a formidable pile. First, the financials. The deed to our estate, stamped paid in full, the latest appraisal, valuing it at $6.2 million. The portfolio for North Star Property Development showing assets totaling over $50 million. My personal net worth statement. Each page was a testament to years of sleepless nights, risky decisions, and relentless hard work. Then came the wedding receipts. I placed the $180,000 final invoice from the event planner on top. Beside it, I put a printed screenshot of Sarah's text message. Backyard weddings aren't really our thing. A bit trashy, don't you think? The juxtaposition was jarring. It was the physical embodiment of their willful ignorance. Then came the personal items. I had a small separate folder for these. It contained printouts of my mother's email about family standards and a transcript of Kevin's voicemail about my basic ceremony. It also contained a copy of the check from my grandmother's inheritance, and tucked behind it, her final letter to me. Her spidery handwriting was a comforting sight. "Don't let them douse your fire, Holly girl. Let it burn so brightly they have to shield their eyes." I felt a surge of strength as I read the words again. Tonight, I would be a wildfire. Lastly, I added something else, a thin file I hadn't shown Liam. It contained my research on my father's business. As a developer, I made it my business to understand the local market, and for the past year, rumors had been swirling about my father's car dealership. I had made a few discreet inquiries, pulling public records. The picture they painted was not a good one. Declining sales, mounting debt, and a few troubling property liens. It wasn't definitive proof of anything, but it was a powerful piece of context. I clicked the black leather briefcase shut. The sound was sharp, final. It felt impossibly heavy, not from the weight of the paper, but from the weight of the story it contained. A story of rejection, of struggle, and ultimately of triumph. Liam walked me to the car. He wasn't coming with me. We had decided this was a fight I had to face alone. His presence would give them an excuse, a diversion. They would blame him, call him a gold digger, anything to avoid looking at their own behavior. This had to be about them and me. "Call me if you need me," he said, kissing me deeply. "I'll be waiting." "I'll be fine," I said, and for the first time, I truly believed it. It's just a business meeting. As I drove down our long, winding driveway, leaving the warm lights of my beautiful home behind, I glanced at the briefcase sitting on the passenger seat. It wasn't just a collection of documents. It was my voice. For my entire life, they had refused to listen to me. Tonight, they would have no choice but to hear every single word. The drive to my parents' house was like traveling back in time. The familiar streets of the affluent suburb where I grew up, with their manicured lawns and identical oversized houses, felt suffocating. This was the world I had run from. The world of keeping up appearances, where the brand of your car mattered more than the kindness in your heart. As I turned onto their street, the first thing I saw was the cars. It looked like a luxury dealership. My sister Sarah's white Mercedes was parked behind my father's Cadillac. My brother Kevin's leased BMW was gleaming under a streetlight. Even my Uncle Robert's ostentatious Lincoln Navigator was there. The whole clan had assembled. It was grimly amusing how an urgent meeting suddenly warranted perfect attendance. No excuses about the drive being too long this time. I parked my own car, a modest but elegant Audi, a little down the street. I took a deep breath, grabbed the heavy briefcase, and stepped out. The click of my heels on the pristine cobblestone walkway sounded unnaturally loud in the quiet evening air. Each step was deliberate, measured. I was walking into the lion's den, but I wasn't the prey anymore. I was the hunter. I reached the front door with its ridiculous oversized brass knocker, but before I could even touch it, the door swung open. My mother, Eleanor, stood there, bathed in the warm, welcoming light of the foyer. She was dressed impeccably, as always, in cream-colored cashmere. Her face was arranged in a perfect mask of maternal concern. "Holly, darling, you're here. We were so worried." Her voice was wrapped in honey and guilt. It was a voice I knew well, the one she used when she was about to ask for something she knew she had no right to. I didn't smile. "The text said 8 o'clock. It's 7:58. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second before being plastered back on. "Of course, dear. Always so punctual. Come in, come in. Everyone's waiting in the living room." She tried to take the briefcase from me. "Let me get that for you. It looks heavy." I held on to it. "I've got it, Mom." The living room was just as I remembered it. Sterile, impersonal, and decorated in 50 shades of beige. It felt more like a hotel lobby than a home. And sitting there, arranged in a perfect semicircle facing the entryway, was the tribunal. My father, Richard, in his usual armchair, looking stern and important. My brother Kevin and his fiancée, Jessica, on the sofa. Kevin was bouncing his leg impatiently, while Jessica sat perfectly still, her expression unreadable. My sister Sarah and her husband Mark were perched on a love seat, looking smug. And in the corner, my Uncle Robert and Aunt Carol, ready to act as the jury. The moment I walked in, a chorus of fake enthusiasm erupted. "There she is, our little TV star," my Uncle Robert boomed, his voice too loud for the room. My sister Sarah stood up, gliding towards me for an air kiss that never made contact with my cheek. "Holly, we saw you on TV. That house of yours is just breathtaking. We had no idea." "You had no idea." The words hung in the air. I looked directly at her. "Really? I invited you to see it multiple times, Sarah. You said it was too far to drive for an old dump." Sarah's face flushed a blotchy red. "Well, I didn't realize what you were doing with it." "Sit down, Holly." My father's voice cut through the tension like a knife. It was the same commanding tone he used on his employees. "We need to talk." "I'll stand," I said coolly, walking over to the large glass coffee table in the center of the room. I placed my briefcase on it with a solid, definitive thud. The sound echoed in the sudden silence. "Your text said this was urgent, so let's not waste any more time with pleasantries we both know are fake. Let's hear it." The directness of my approach clearly threw them off. They were expecting the old Holly, the one who would be so grateful for this audience that she would overlook the 14 months of silence. They weren't prepared for this version of me. Kevin leaned forward, attempting to smooth things over with his trademark smarmy charm. Come on, Hal. We're just happy for you. The place looks amazing. Seriously, we're proud. Thank you, I replied flatly, my eyes not leaving my father's. My father cleared his throat, leaning forward in his chair. He steepled his fingers, a gesture he thought made him look like a powerful CEO. To me, he just looked like a weak man playing a part. $6.2 million, he said, the number rolling off his tongue slowly, savoring it. That's quite an investment for someone who was supposedly living beyond her means. It was a direct hit, a callback to the last real conversation we'd had, 2 months before my wedding, when he'd lectured me for an hour about my financial irresponsibility for buying the estate in the first place. My mother jumped in, her voice taking on that soft, worried, manipulative tone. Honey, we're just concerned. We want to be sure you're not in over your head. Surely you took out a massive mortgage for a property like that. That kind of debt would crush anyone your age. They were laying the trap, painting me as a reckless, indebted child who needed their wise, parental guidance. It was their classic strategy: belittle, control, and then extract what they wanted. I almost laughed. I looked around the room from one greedy, expectant face to the next. Why would you assume I have debt? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Uncle Robert snorted from the corner. Because nobody in their 30s owns a $6 million estate outright, that's why. You must be leveraged to the hilt. That's why you had that cheap little wedding, isn't it? Cutting corners. The pieces clicked into place. This was their narrative. I was successful, yes, but I was also vulnerable. In their minds, I was drowning in debt, and they were here to throw me a life raft. A life raft that would, of course, come at a very steep price. They had no idea. They weren't facing a drowning woman. They were facing the iceberg that was about to sink their entire ship. A heavy silence settled over the room, thick with their assumptions. They were all looking at me, waiting for me to crack, to confess my financial struggles, to ask for their help. My sister's husband, Mark, who worked in some vaguely defined finance job and always acted like he was the next Warren Buffett, leaned forward eagerly. Holly, we're not judging, he said, his tone oozing with condescension. We just want to help. I've got a great real estate agent. We could list the property next week, get you out from under it before the market turns, take the profits and invest it in something more stable. He was already spending my money for me. The audacity of it was breathtaking. I held up a hand, cutting him off mid-sentence. The gesture was sharp, commanding. He snapped his mouth shut, looking surprised. Before we continue discussing my finances, I said, my voice calm and even, I have a question for all of you. It's a simple one. Why didn't any of you come to my wedding? The question landed like a grenade in the center of the beige room. No one spoke. Not a single person would meet my eyes. Jessica, my brother's fiancée, looked down at her hands. My mother suddenly found a piece of lint on her cashmere sweater intensely fascinating. I sent invitations 6 months in advance. I called each of you personally, and every single one of you made an excuse about why my wedding, the most important day of my life, wasn't worth attending. That's not fair, Sarah said quickly, her voice high-pitched. We explained it. It wasn't special enough to warrant that kind of travel. It wasn't a real celebration. You said it wasn't a real celebration, I repeated, locking eyes with her. You said it was trashy. Kevin said it was basic. Mom said it didn't meet family standards. So tell me, what changed between then and now? Kevin shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. We didn't know, he stammered. You didn't know what? I snapped, my voice like the crack of a whip. That the old dump was actually a multi-million-dollar estate? That the basic backyard wedding was in gardens that are now featured in 3 national magazines? You never told us, Sarah said defensively, as if it were my fault. I invited you. I begged you to come see it. Mom said she was too busy redecorating this room. Dad said he didn't have time for my hobby. Kevin didn't even return my call. My father's jaw tightened. We are not here to rehash the past, Holly. This is about your current financial situation, and more importantly, about the family's future. Finally, we were getting to it. The real reason. My financial situation? I echoed. All right, let's talk about it. I turned to the briefcase, the sound of the metal clasps popping open echoing through the room. I reached inside and pulled out the first document, crisp, heavy paper. I placed it on the glass table with a soft slap. That's the deed to the estate, I announced. It's fully paid off, no mortgage, no debt. My Uncle Robert, unable to contain himself, lunged forward and snatched it. He scanned it quickly, his face paling as he read the words. Free and clear, he whispered, disbelief in his voice. She actually owns it outright. I laid down another sheet. This is an appraisal from last week. The show increased its value overnight. It's now worth $6.2 million. My father's hand trembled slightly as he reached for his glass of water. How did you afford this? I worked for it, I said simply. And then my father played his hand. He looked at me, his expression a bizarre mixture of pride in the asset I represented and anger that I had achieved it without him. Well, he said, clearing his throat, it's good that you are in such a strong position, because the family needs your help. He paused for dramatic effect. Your brother Kevin has a fantastic business opportunity, but he needs capital. And Sarah and Mark want to buy a larger house. As the most successful member of the family, it is now your duty, your responsibility to help them. I stared at him, dumbfounded. It was even worse than I had imagined. And your mother and I, he continued, his voice taking on a righteous tone, feel that we are owed a return on our investment in you over the years. All the schooling, the clothes, the food. Are you serious? I whispered, the words barely audible. It was Kevin who delivered the final, unbelievable blow. He leaned forward, his face a mask of pure entitlement. Look, Holly, it's simple. We've talked it over as a family. We think it's only fair that you give me $1 million and another $1 million for Sarah. It's the least you can do. Consider it back pay for all the years you got more attention, especially from Grandma Rose. Her inheritance should have been split equally. There it was. Not a request for a loan, not a plea for help, a demand. A $2 million demand framed as something I owed them. They had carved up my success like a pie before I had even walked through the door. The sheer, unadulterated greed was so profound, so shocking, that all I could do was stare. They mistook my stunned silence for consideration. It's a small price to pay to be part of this family again, Holly, my mother said softly, her eyes pleading. Part of the family? The price of admission was $2 million. Something inside me, the last fragile thread of hope that there was something salvageable here, finally, irrevocably snapped. I looked around the room, at their greedy, expectant faces, and I began to laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. It was a cold, sharp, broken laugh that echoed with 14 months of pain and a lifetime of disappointment. They just stared at me, their smiles starting to fade, a flicker of uncertainty in their eyes. The audit was about to begin. My laughter died down, leaving a chilling silence in its wake. I wiped a non-existent tear from my eye and leaned forward, my hands flat on the glass table. $1 million for Kevin, I said, my voice dangerously soft. The brother who called my wedding basic. And $1 million for Sarah, the sister who called it trashy, and a return on investment for the parents who couldn't even be bothered to RSVP. That's quite the proposition. It's what's fair, my father said, his voice hardening. He didn't like being laughed at. Fair? I asked, my eyebrows raising. Let's talk about fair. I reached back into the briefcase. You think my wedding was cheap? I said, pulling out a sheaf of papers and fanning them out like playing cards. This is the invoice from the caterer, a Michelin-starred chef. This one is for the flowers, $15,000 for the white roses alone. This is the contract for the string quartet from Carnegie Hall. And this, I placed the final receipt on top with a flourish, is for my Vera Wang gown. I looked up at Sarah, whose mouth had fallen open. The total cost for my basic, trashy little backyard wedding was $180,000. A collective gasp went through the room. My mother's hand flew to her chest. But you said it was casual, she stammered. Casual meant intimate, I corrected her, my voice like ice. 50 guests instead of 500. A meaningful location instead of a pretentious ballroom. Casual never meant cheap. You just assumed it did. You assumed I was struggling. You assumed I was beneath you. You assumed wrong. I let that sink in for a moment before continuing. You want to talk about investments, Dad? Let's talk about my company. I pulled out the next document, the portfolio for North Star Property Development, and slid it across the table to him. You called my life's work a hobby. You said I was playing entrepreneur. Well, this hobby is currently valued at $52 million. Our net assets as of last quarter were $24.7 million. That's my company, not yours, not Kevin's, mine. My father stared at the numbers, his face ashen. Kevin snatched the document from him, his eyes bugging out. 52 million? He whispered, the sound choked with disbelief. And my personal net worth, I added, pulling out the final financial statement, is 31 million. Not bad for someone living beyond her means, right? The silence in the room was now thick and perfect. It was the sound of their entire worldview crumbling to dust, all their assumptions, their condescension, their carefully constructed narrative of my failure and their superiority, all of it gone in a puff of smoke. But I was just getting started. The problem isn't that you didn't know I was successful, I said, my gaze sweeping across each of their stunned faces. The problem is that you didn't care enough to find out. I told you I was restoring a historic estate. You called it a dump. I told you I was starting a business. You patted me on the head. I invited you to share in the most important day of my life, and you said it wasn't special enough. My voice started to tremble, not with weakness, but with a righteous fury that had been simmering for years. You know what's special? Marcus's engagement party 2 years ago. Do you remember that? A cheap conference room at a Hampton Inn, a grocery store cake. I flew in from Seattle, where I was overseeing a project. I brought a $500 gift, and I stayed until the very end, smiling and celebrating with him. That's what family does. They show up. That's different, Kevin muttered, flushing a deep red. How? I demanded, standing up straight. How is it different? Because it was your celebration, it was worthy, but mine wasn't? Is that it? This isn't fair, Holly, Sarah suddenly cried out, finding her voice. You're making us feel guilty. You should feel guilty, I shot back. You should feel ashamed, but you don't. You just feel angry that you miscalculated. You backed the wrong horse. You thought Kevin was the star, and I was the nobody, and you can't stand that you got it wrong." Sarah jumped to her feet, her face contorted with a rage born of pure jealousy. "You think you're so much better than us, don't you? With your fancy house and your millions? You always have. I tried to warn people you were a fraud. When you were first looking for investors for that stupid company of yours, I told Dad's friend at the bank that you were unreliable and had no idea what you were doing." The confession hung in the air, ugly and shocking. So it wasn't just indifference. It was active sabotage. My own sister had tried to ruin me before I even began. The betrayal was so profound, so venomous, it made the wedding boycott seem like a minor slight. I just stared at her, the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place. The early struggles, the investors who had suddenly and inexplicably pulled out, it had been her. My father looked horrified, not at what Sarah had done, but that she had admitted it out loud. "Sarah, for God's sake, shut up," he hissed. But the damage was done. The last vestiges of their moral high ground had evaporated. They weren't just a greedy, entitled family, they were malicious. My father, seeing he was losing control, decided to escalate. "That's enough, Holly. You've made your point. But don't forget, I gave you the money to get started with that first cottage. A small loan. That makes me an investor in your company. Legally, I am entitled to a share of your profits. And if you refuse to be reasonable, I will have no choice but to call my lawyer and take you to court to get what we are owed." He sat back, a smug look on his face. The final threat, the lawsuit. He thought he had me cornered. He thought that after everything, I would still be the scared little girl who just wanted her daddy's approval. He was about to find out just how much I had changed. The threat of a lawsuit hung in the air, thick and poisonous. My father looked triumphant, certain he had just played his winning card. My mother nodded in approval. Sarah looked smug, and Kevin leaned back as if the $1 million was already in his bank account. They actually thought this would work? They thought they could bully me, threaten me, and I would just write a check to make them go away. I looked at my father, a man I had once idolized, and felt nothing but a cold, empty pity. "You're not going to call your lawyer, Dad," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "And you're not going to sue me." "Oh, really?" he scoffed. "And why is that?" I reached into the briefcase one last time. I pulled out the final thin file, the one I hadn't even shown Liam. I didn't place it on the table. I held it in my hand. "Because you can't afford a lawyer," I said simply. "In fact, you can't afford much of anything right now. The dealership is on the verge of bankruptcy, isn't it?" The color drained from my father's face. My mother gasped. How did you know that?" he stammered. "It's my business to know things, Dad. Public records are a powerful tool, but that's not the really interesting part. The interesting part is why the business is failing. It's not the market. The market for luxury cars is actually up this quarter. No, the business is failing because for the past 2 years, you have been systematically embezzling funds from it. It's not the market. You've been funneling money out of the company accounts into a private, offshore account. At first, I couldn't figure out why. Your lifestyle hasn't changed that dramatically. But then I realized the money wasn't just for you." I turned my gaze to my brother. "It was for you, wasn't it, Kevin, to cover your gambling debts, the ones you've been racking up for years, the trips to Vegas, the online poker sites. Dad's been cleaning up your messes, stealing from his own company to keep his golden boy from facing the consequences of his actions. He's been robbing his employees of their salaries and their futures to pay for your addiction." Kevin looked like I had physically struck him. He was white as a sheet, his mouth opening and closing with no sound coming out. "You're lying," my mother whispered, her voice trembling. "Richard, tell her she's lying." But my father couldn't speak. He just stared at the file in my hand as if it were a venomous snake. "Am I?" I asked softly. "I wonder what the IRS would think, or the partners you've been lying to. Embezzlement, tax fraud, those are serious crimes. They carry serious prison time." "You have no proof," my father finally roared, finding his voice. It was the desperate roar of a trapped animal. "It's your word against mine." "Actually," a quiet voice said from the sofa, "she does have proof." Every head in the room swiveled. It was Jessica, Kevin's fiancée. She stood up slowly, her movements graceful and deliberate. Her face was pale, but her eyes were clear and resolved. She looked at me, a silent apology and a world of understanding passing between us in an instant. Her cryptic emails suddenly made perfect, horrifying sense. More than you know. She reached into her purse and pulled out a slim USB drive. She held it up for everyone to see. "I'm a paralegal, Richard," Jessica said, her voice shaking slightly but gaining strength with every word. "I know what financial statements are supposed to look like. And for months, Kevin has been asking me to help him with paperwork he didn't understand. What he was really showing me were falsified reports. But I also saw the real ones, the real bank transfers, the real credit card statements. He was sloppy. He left them on his laptop." She looked at Kevin, and the contempt in her eyes was withering. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, a one-time thing, but it never stopped. And then I realized you were all in on it. You were all willing to let this business and the people who depend on it go down in flames, just to protect him. She walked over to the coffee table and placed the USB drive next to my pile of documents. It was a declaration of allegiance. "This drive," she said, her voice ringing with conviction, "contains copies of everything. The offshore account numbers, the transfer records, the emails between you and Kevin, everything the authorities would need to build a case." She then turned, her eyes finding Kevin's. "I cannot marry a man or a family whose entire foundation is built on lies and deceit." She slipped the large, gaudy engagement ring from her finger and placed it on the table next to the USB drive. "We're done, Kevin. I'm leaving." The sound of the ring clinking against the glass was the sound of their world shattering. It was over. The lies, the threats, the entitlement, all of it had been annihilated by the simple, devastating power of the truth. I looked at my family. My father, slumped in his chair, looked like a man who had aged 20 years in 20 minutes. My mother was openly weeping. Sarah was staring at Jessica with a look of pure hatred. And Kevin just looked like a lost little boy, his entire life of privilege and protection ripped away from him in an instant. I had come here expecting a fight. I had come prepared for a battle of wills. But this wasn't a battle. It was a complete and total surrender. I had won. But standing there, amidst the wreckage of my family, it didn't feel like a victory. It just felt final. Thank you for staying with me through this. You are a truly patient and wonderful person. Please like this video and comment with the number 1 below, just so I know you've journeyed with me this far. Your support is a tremendous encouragement for me to keep sharing. Just comment the number 1 and then listen as I tell you how this all ended. The room was a vacuum, all the air sucked out by Jessica's bombshell revelation. She didn't wait for a response. She simply picked up her purse, gave me one last, meaningful look, and walked out of the room, her head held high. The soft click of the front door closing behind her was like the period at the end of a very long, very painful chapter.
No one moved. They were a tableau of ruin, frozen in their shock and shame. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating.
It was finally broken by my mother's ragged sobs. "How could you, Holly?" she cried, looking at me as if I were the villain. "How could you do this to your own family?" The gaslighting was so reflexive, so deeply ingrained, that it was almost impressive. Even now, faced with irrefutable proof of their own corruption, they tried to twist the narrative, to paint me as the one who had betrayed them. I looked at her, my heart a cold, hard stone in my chest. "Me?" I asked, my voice devoid of all emotion. "I didn't do this. You did. You did this when you decided your standards were more important than my happiness. You did this when you valued your son's comfort over your daughter's heart. You did this when you taught us that love was conditional, that it had to be earned through success you could brag about. I didn't destroy this family. It was already rotten from the inside out. I just turned on the lights." I calmly began to gather my documents from the coffee table, leaving the engagement ring and the USB drive where they lay. I slid my papers back into the briefcase, the movements precise and unhurried. I was in complete control. My father finally looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and defeated. What do you want, Holly?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. It was the first honest question he had asked me all night. I snapped the briefcase shut and stood to my full height, looking down at the wreckage of the people who had given me life but had never truly given me a family. "What do I want?" I repeated. "I want what I should have had 14 months ago. I want a family that shows up, a family that supports each other without a price tag, a family that celebrates each other's joys and shares each other's burdens. But I know now that I will never, ever get that from any of you." I paused, letting the finality of those words sink in. "So, here is what is going to happen," I said, my voice leaving no room for negotiation. "My lawyer has drafted an agreement. It will be messengered to you tomorrow morning. It's a simple contract. It stipulates that none of you, not my parents, not my siblings, not any extended family acting on your behalf, will ever contact me again, for any reason. You will not call, you will not text, you will not email, you will not show up at my home or my office. You will make no further financial claims on me or my company. You will, for all intents and purposes, cease to exist in my life, and I in yours." "You can't do that," my mother wailed. "You can't just cut us off." "I can," I said firmly. "You sign it. You all sign it. And in return, that USB drive and all the information it contains will remain my private property. I will not go to the authorities. I will not ruin you publicly. I will simply disappear from your lives. You can deal with the financial mess you've made on your own." I looked at each of them one by one. "But if you refuse to sign, if I receive so much as a single unwanted phone call from any of you ever again, then all bets are off. I will turn everything over to the IRS and the district attorney. I will not hesitate. Do you understand me?" No one answered. They just stared, their faces a mixture of horror and dawning realization. They had lost. They had lost everything. Not just the money they so desperately craved, but they had lost me forever. "You have 24 hours to sign," I said, turning to leave. "The clock starts now." I walked out of the room without a backward glance. I didn't run. I walked calmly, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor. As I opened the front door, I heard my father's voice, a broken, desperate plea. "Holly, please." I paused in the doorway, my back still to them. "You know what I wanted, Dad?" I said softly to the empty night air. I wanted you to walk me down the aisle. I wanted Mom to help me pick out my dress. I wanted Sarah to be my maid of honor. I wanted Kevin to give a goofy, embarrassing toast about our childhood. That's all I ever wanted. I stepped out into the cool, clean air and pulled the door shut behind me, leaving them to suffocate in the ruins of the life they had built on lies. The drive home was quiet. I didn't turn on the radio. I just listened to the sound of the engine, the world outside a blur of passing lights. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel happy. I felt empty. It was the emptiness that comes after a great storm has passed, leveling everything in its path. It was the quiet of a battlefield after the war is over. When I pulled into my driveway, the house was ablaze with light. Liam must have turned on every lamp inside. As I got out of the car, the front door opened, and he was there, silhouetted against the warm glow. He didn't say a word. He just opened his arms, and I walked into them. He held me for a long time, his embrace solid and real. I didn't cry. I think I had run out of tears for them a long time ago. "It's done," I whispered into his chest. "I know," he said. "I'm proud of you." Inside, our dog Maisie greeted me with joyful abandon, a furry whirlwind of unconditional love. Wedding photos covered the walls, pictures of our friends, of Liam's wonderful, sprawling family who had welcomed me as their own from day one. They were smiling, laughing, celebrating. They were the truth of that magical day. I blocked their numbers from my phone that night, all of them. The next afternoon, a courier confirmed that the signed agreements had been received by my lawyer. It was over. A few days later, a single text came through from an unknown number. "Holly, this is Aunt Carol. I have no excuses. I am so deeply ashamed and sorry for my part in all of this. I don't want anything from you. I just wanted to say that. I hope one day you can find happiness." I stared at the message for a long time. It was the first genuine apology I had received from anyone in my blood family in my entire life. I typed back a simple reply. "Thank you, Aunt Carol. I wish you the same." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning, a tiny seed of hope that perhaps not every branch of that family tree was poisoned. Life moved on. Our company closed the $12 million hotel renovation deal. Forbes published a feature on me titled "The Woman Who Rebuilds History." Liam and I celebrated our second anniversary in a small villa overlooking the hills of Tuscany. We drank wine, ate pasta, and talked about the future, a future that felt bright and boundless. I haven't missed them. Sometimes a pang of sadness will hit me, a phantom limb of what a family is supposed to be. But then I look at Liam. I think of our friends, of his family, of the life we have built, and I know the truth. I learned it from that empty wedding table. The people who show up when it doesn't benefit them, the people who love you for who you are, not what you have, those are your real family. Everyone else is just related by blood, and I've learned that blood isn't nearly as thick as honesty, loyalty, and love. My grandmother was right. I didn't let them douse my fire. I let it burn, and in its light, I finally found my way home. Thank you for listening to my entire story. I am truly grateful for your time and your presence. Please comment with the letter A so I know you are one of the special ones who made it all the way through to the end. If you have any thoughts or feelings you'd like to share, I would love to read them. Please feel free to click on another video on this channel to enjoy more of our stories. Thank you again.